Hi, everybody. Today we have the pleasure of Jennifer Hourihane as our guest.
Thanks, Kira. Such a pleasure to chat to you both today. I'm Jennifer Hourihane. I'm a fellow lawyer, met Kira back in the day in Blackhall Place, and I'm the founder of a company called Oathello. And very happy to chat about all things law. It's been my life's work, so really an honor to speak to both of you today.
And let's go back to the very beginning. And I'd like to know if there was a point in and time in your life where you decided you wanted to be a lawyer.
Not really. That's the honest answer. I think maybe it's the availability of so many fantastic university courses and whatnot. Like I could have easily fallen into English or history or whatever, had a little leaning towards the English language, but there was something maybe in the back of my mind, I was uncomfortable of doing those subjects rather than law. And I think probably anyone who studies law has a greater motivation to go on and do it, which is why I think this podcast is so interesting because you guys touch on some of that. So something guided me towards just putting law down as my base degree, but I can't say that there was any incredible aha moment. It was just more a leaning towards it and knowing it was so accessible in Ireland, and I've never looked back. Really happy. So I did my degree in University College Cork and started in 2006, graduated in 2010, but didn't think very much about it really before entering into it, to be perfectly frank.
Okay, let's go to 2010 then. How was it trying to find a traineeship and basically trying to find your way in law?
My God. So yeah, that's where all of the juicy stuff starts. I think I sailed through the degree like any college student does, really enjoying some of the content as any law student would. And it's a great degree to do, but you emerge into a global recession. And, anyone with any sense or a couple of years on you turns around and says, are you crazy? You want to qualify to be a lawyer? Because by the end of the degree, I was pretty certain I actually wanted to follow through and do the professional qualification. I had been inspired a little bit by my time in Luxembourg. I'd worked on the ArcelorMittal merger with a firm there in Luxembourg, had some great actual experience even before getting my degree, but just decided, yeah, I'm going to go up the road to Dublin and train in a commercial law firm. And, that's my path. Anyone with any sense or years on me, as I said, told me I was crazy. But anyway, I went ahead and did it and spent about 5.5, 6 years then learning all of the parts to become a qualified solicitor. Very interesting journey and very interesting to qualify or even train in the middle of a global recession. Taught me a lot about the operations of a law firm, but also the crazy challenges that businesses were facing at that time. There were some very tense moments where the work I was doing, and again, maybe just to wind back a bit, I think working in a top 10 or top 20 commercial law firm at that stage, you're given a lot of agency on autonomy. You're getting guidance from a partner, but you're also picking up a lot of work that you might not necessarily always get exposed to because it's all hands on deck in that type of environment. And we worked really hard for clients in that time. It was a very interesting time. And I think the positive to all of that, aside from the negatives of not a great work-life balance, very hard work, all hands on deck, is that you got exposed to all of the moving parts of a business. What happens when it succeeds? What happens when it fails? What happens when, things aren't all going rosy in the garden and really hard business decisions need to be made?
We've heard that before, and I remember it very clearly. During this time, like you mentioned, that you worked like really long hours. What motivated you to keep going?
The honest answer, what motivates you is the partners, your boss, your leaders. There are some fantastic business leaders that operate within law firms today. And that's the primary thing that keeps you going. That's the reason why you stay in the saddle. That's the reason why you come in on a Saturday, you get a lot because you look back and you realize how much you've learned. And I know that there's a famous book, Outliers, Malcolm Gladwell, 10,000 Hours. And I remember when I interviewed to do my traineeship initially, and I luckily got one, I asked a question like, what makes you successful in law? And one of the partners' answers was longevity. And now I understand the reason why, but they're great leaders. They're very inspiring people. They hold the hands of business people through the best and the worst of times. So when you witness that in person, that keeps you going.
However, 2015, you made a huge change that not many lawyers have taken. So talk us through that.
An all firm email went out on the 23rd of December, frantically looking for a notary to close a deal late at night. And I just wondered why 700 people were involved in this conversation, and just had a moment. I had been thinking a lot about, and colleagues of mine that I had worked with after the fact, I remember you talking about something like this at the photocopier, but there was just this light bulb moment for me of why can we not connect the services that lawyers need, provide a platform, provide an easier way of doing things so that the client or the lawyers aren't distressed by a massive delay in essentially what is like one of the most important parts of a transaction. It's usually the icing on the cake. Get something certified or notarized and the deal is done. So that was my aha moment to set the company up. However, the idea, or yes, I want to found a company around this idea, is a lot easier said than done. So there was a ton of emotional turmoil that went into what in my mind at the time was dumping all of this fantastic experience and knowledge that I had gained over the course of the last 7 to 10 years and what I thought was going to be my career in law forever, and making that transition into business. And it took a while. I remember just spending some of my annual leave with my laptop, researching. My flatmate at the time came back from touring the Great Wall of China and must have thought I'd had a nervous breakdown because there were post-its all over the place. And that was the beginning of my application for the Competitive Startup Fund grant from Enterprise Ireland, which at the time was €50,000 for 10% equity in your company. They've since changed the model a little bit. While I was still practicing lawyer, made the application, got it, and just made a call on it one day. And it was quite actually, I made the call on the back of just closing a deal for a whole entire week. And I just walked into my partner and was like, I think I'm leaving the firm. I have a business idea. And he was fantastic about it and so supportive, so helpful. And it was probably about a 6-month process of, am I really going to do this? And maybe what made the decision a little bit easier is that my idea was still centered around law. It was still centered around notaries who were lawyers, commissioner for oaths who were lawyers. Anyone who's ever had to get a document certified or notarized will know the pain points, but the professionals know them too. So that probably gave me a little bit of comfort to make that jump. But it was quite tough, actually. And it was an entirely different world.
It's incredible that you did that at a time when startups weren't so much in fashion yet. There wasn't so much knowledge on how to set up or grow a startup as it is, as accessible, at least as it is now. You talked earlier on about the leaders in the law firm and how they become inspirational and motivating to continue learning and serving as a lawyer. I think it's also admirable that you went down the startup path on your own, being a boss of yourself without that lighthouse that maybe your colleagues or your boss would be. And yeah, I find that very brave. They say about startups that they are an act of optimism. Many people have ideas, and actually very good ideas, but going down that road and pursuing them and putting them in paper and then making them part of the real world, that's a different story, and it requires a lot of courage and a lot of optimism. So yeah, it's a source of inspiration for myself, and I guess for many people listening to this.
And actually, you're so right on that point. David Cohen, CEO of Techstars, one of the leaders within Techstars, who became a part of the Oathello journey later on, from what we were talking about, that Kira was mentioning, making the jump from practicing in law to founding your own business. But he spoke of the hazard of happy years, because all entrepreneurs suffer from the disease of happy years. We hear something and it might be pretty mediocre news or statement, but entrepreneurs will hear, yeah, just made a sale. And he advises against, or he basically advises probably for countering against that disease of happy years that all entrepreneurs suffer from. And it's so true. So that actually was a constant struggle throughout the journey of entrepreneurship as well, really maintaining a steady balance as well, like when you're building something new and all the rest, which actually in reality means nothing. Where are your sales? How's it going? Have you moved or changed the system? You know, that they're really the only things that matter.
The other thing that I think is incredible in this journey is we're at an era where everybody's talking about AI, and it's entering in all kinds of professional sectors. You brought technology into the legal profession a long time ago. I'd like for you, if you can walk us through a little bit what you wanted to achieve with Oathello. And also, what's your take about AI in law?
Yeah, that's really interesting because there's so much talk going on at the moment between the advent of the internet 25 years ago versus the new wave of AI, which is analogous entirely to the boom of the internet that started 25 years ago or whatever. And AI is a new thing. I really think they're one and the same. It's just a new dimension to the internet. I believe, and it might sound a little ignorant, but I won't back away from this belief, that AI can only ever feed us back what we already know in a different way. So when it comes to its application to law, for example, or legal technology, first of all, at the time that I set the company up, I was far more concerned with getting paper out of a dusty, under the desk environment to digital, live, secure, online in minutes. That was my goal. And the internet did more than enough to facilitate that. The truth is still that the internet alone can still do a lot for the legal services industry. AI can be amazing co-pilot, as we hear those terms thrown out. It can be amazing assistant. It will never replace a lawyer. I think, I'm not sure, probably one of the Greek philosophers, and probably your influence, Angelique, on the entire podcast, but every good deal is based on reason, logic, and emotion. AI cannot replace that. It will never supplant a lawyer. So, my views on AI, they might appear or sound a little ignorant. I think they're a great tool. Artificial intelligence applications are a great tool, but no different to the internet. And I think if the legal industry could broadly adopt the internet first, we would be doing really well. And I think that sits with the governments of each individual jurisdiction to achieve that.
What I was wondering is there a technological innovation that would make your life easier, be it as professional or beyond?
Yeah, I wonder, would less technology make life easier or more? Because we live our lives on the internet now. And I think the more applications we sign up for, the more times we're asked to enter in our email address, our authentications, our phone numbers, and whatnot. I think the European Union have done a lot since 2014 to make our lives on the internet a little bit easier. And I think the advent of digital wallets and digital wallet identification and stuff like that would be amazing. And imagine if just your fingerprint could connect you to all services, whether it was your electricity and whatever else. And all of those things have complex layers to them because some events on the internet will require your passport and biometric verification and stuff like that. And some will just require a simple password. A lot of startups are actually currently working on all that, but they're quite fragmented and they all have different investors, different backers, different motivations. But and I'm not saying we should move towards China where you have an app with a credit rating score and blah, blah, blah. I think there's a happy medium that would make your life easier on the internet, but and while protecting your identity and your financial details, etc. But just easing accessibility of all of that.
I think having you today here is debunking myths one after the other. You working as a lawyer, being an entrepreneur, but also your knowledge on technology and your take on what can make life easier. I was wondering if you could give an advice to a lawyer or a prospective lawyer. What would it be? What kind of advice would you give?
Longevity, stay with it. You can't do a year in law and know anything really. And I think it goes back to another point I was making around AI will never supplant a lawyer. It will never supplant that curiosity and ability and everything that a legal training gives you. So sticking with it, I would say. If you do a law degree, I think you should go on to do your bar exam. You should go on to actually work in a legal capacity in some way, because it's the only way that you will really ultimately provide value in a very clean, confident way. There's no other way. And it's quite a circular thing when we mention around certain technologies that can help lawyers. They'll never replace lawyers. That's my advice, actually. It goes back to the advice that I got from a partner from day one, longevity. Stay with it. Get those 10,000 hours or 20,000 hours or whatever it is. And you will reap the rewards in really interesting ways because law touches on everything. Anyone you will meet, you will be able to help, whether commercially or pro bono, you'll be able to add value to our planet if you stay with it. It's a path that if you stick with it, can be extremely rewarding.
I have a question. Did you find that after, 5 years of working, was it 5.5 years you were in the firm? Did you find that much of what you learned there?
Than that. Yeah.
Yeah. Were you able to bring much of what you learned, your experience, both from, say, the technical part, but also the soft skills, into your role and your day-to-day life when you set up your own company? So that's my first question. And my second is, how different were the two day-to-day lives that you had?
I think even as a newly qualified solicitor or however many years of post-qualification experience you have, it's really around the amount of hours that you've done, who you've been exposed to, what you've done, etc. The dove of wisdom does not fall upon someone just because they have a practicing cert, I don't believe. Or similarly, you could coast through your legal career and not be exposed to a dynamic amount of things. Yeah, like how much you can transfer is really down to how much you've done. And then secondly, like the difference in terms of routine or typical day and things like that, like quite different in terms of the challenges that you face. I think you've some idea if you're working within a well-oiled organization, you know your clients, you know your live files, you're pretty organized about what you're facing. If you're good at your job or if your team or your partner is good at their job, everyone is working together towards something quite regimented every single day. On the flip, when you go out there into the Wild West, literally no day can be predicted. You never know when you're going to get a customer is not happy with one thing or another, a time zone conflicts with your product roadmap, and suddenly a really important booking has fallen through. there's just challenges that lie with a small organization starting out to do something big. So very different.
Would you be able to single out maybe a high and a low, two moments of this journey that you can share with us?
Wow. Okay. So the high was definitely achieving the first digital notarization in the history of the Commonwealth. And I'll never forget it, actually. It was during COVID. We had been building the solution since we got the backing of Techstars Barclays in 2018. We had been building it for a year and a half. We had been talking to institutions about what was acceptable. We had been talking to the legal professionals about what they were willing to do and what we needed to do from a technological standpoint to de-risk the transaction online. And then it happened. And one of our clients was admitted to the SEC digitally for the first time. And it was amazing. It was really great and felt great. I knew it was one of the first ones in our legal system. And then what comes with that is just a bunch of lows that I probably touched on already, which is it probably goes back to Kira's original question around what were the key differences that you could identify between being a practicing lawyer and being, let's say, an entrepreneur, even albeit within the legal world. There's a certain level of collegiality that exists between lawyers, and it's a thing that we're probably trained for. And even if you're the opposite number to whoever and you're doing your best for your client, there is a system of trust between lawyers in the professional capacity on behalf of your client that you can rely on. And that does not exist in the business world.
That is, to be honest, that is fascinating. And I agree from my own experience in the two different worlds. And believe it or not, Angelique, there is this kind of code of conduct. Perhaps that's what we need to sign when we sign the role of solicitors. But there is a code of conduct that you have to follow, and the Law Society does actually hold you accountable. And in the business world, especially the startup world,
there's nothing.
Absolutely
it's
nothing.
The Wild West. So any budding entrepreneurial lawyers, it's very different on the outside.
Honestly, it's been really amazing to talk to somebody who has done both. And you've shared so much with us. So thank you. The last thing that we'd like you to share is basically your favorite song and why, or what significance it holds for you.
Yeah, wow. It's gas. I'm obsessed with Fleetwood Mac. I think for at least 10 or 15 years, I think the first time I came across them was ironically coming home from work and just randomly turning on the BBC and watching BBC music documentary about Fleetwood Mac and the band and their genesis and everything else. And I just fell in love with them from day one. And I think I would have to say my favorite song is The Chain by Fleetwood Mac. And it's, funnily enough, it's the only song written by the band that has writing credits to all 5 members at the time. And it was written at a time when none of them were really talking to each other. They were jamming together in a session, they were making music, but they weren't on a personal level getting on with each other very well. And The Chain for me is about keeping the show on the road, just staying in the saddle and sticking with the objective, even though there's a lot of challenges and a lot of friction. And I think now more than ever, keeping connections and maintaining your sanity and being more aware of the wider objective is more relevant than ever. And then you've got that incredible bass from John McPhee, which I think is like the Formula One theme tune or something like that. But yeah, The Chain, Fleetwood Mac.
Thank you for this very grounded but also very inspirational closing. Thank you very much for sharing your journey.
Thanks, guys. Really lovely to chat. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.